Hi, good afternoon. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And welcome to the Dynamics GP year-end process. My name is Shaun and I'm a Dynamics GP consultant at Nolan Business Solutions. Today we're going to cover the year-end process, which is actually quite straightforward in many ways, but I'm going to go through with you a good step-by-step procedure on which bits to do in which of the series and how to go about doing it. So hopefully we should be finished within about 30 or 35 minutes. And if we are recording this, so if in the future you need to come back to this, we do make this video available on YouTube or on our website. And any questions that you have, you're welcome to type them into the chat on your right of your screens. There's a little chat box for the meeting control panel, and at the end I can attempt to answer any questions depending on the time, of course. But if not, then at the end you can send us an email. I'll provide an email at the end on my last slide, and you can send any questions that you have to that email address and we can get them answered for you as soon as possible. Okay, so if we look at our agenda today, so basically for the year-end process, each module or series, if you like, in GP have their own year-end routines. So inventory, of course, our sales and purchase ledger, receivables, and payables management, fixed assets. Analytical accounting doesn't really have a year-end process. However, there are articles online about what you should do with analytical accounting near the year-end. And of course, the most important part of the year-end is our general ledger. So the first thing you do, of course, before any year-end process or before you even get started is take a backup. So it's always a good idea to have a chat with your IT beforehand. So if you're planning to do a year-end tomorrow, you chat with your IT and you make sure that they're aware of what you're doing, because they would likely be the ones to take a backup of your data. Of course, GP does allow you to take backups within GP, but it's always recommended that your IT are aware of what you're doing and you can ask them to make backups when required. Okay, and of course, if something goes wrong during a year-end, like you lose connection, GP loses connection to the server somehow, or there's a power outage or something like that, a backup comes in handy because you can roll back everything to your previous state and everything's okay. Okay, so if we start with inventory, on the slide on the screen I've provided some Microsoft knowledge base articles that can be referenced by you guys, and Microsoft go into quite a lot of detail on the year-end closing procedures for each module, and also give you other information on possible issues that you could encounter, or if you need to do something on the part of the year-end. They go into more detail than what I'm going to go into detail today. So if I jump to if I jump to Dynamics, for every module, the first thing to start off with when you do, as part of a year-end, your first process you should try and post all the transactions that are required to post before doing any kind of year-end routine. So if we look at our inventory series posting, basically what we'd be looking to do is we'd look to see if there are any recurring or type of transactions and when they were last posted. So if a recurring type transaction needs to be posted, you would post them. If not, and the last post was already this month, then you don't need to post it again. But in the series posting section, you would just post all the transactions that you would be required to post before the year end. Okay, so you'd basically, as you normally do, mark them as you want to post, and then you'd post it. Okay. You've got the inventory reconcile. So basically what this process does, it will reconcile inventory quantities to the transactions and check the on hold quantities, check the on order quantities, and make sure that they're actually correct based on the transactions and what your stock is within the system. So it's always good to run this process. Dynamics will run a check and update any discrepancies for you. Okay. Next we have our stock count entry. So you don't have to necessarily do this within GP. So potentially you do a stock count external to the system, and you can come into Dynamics and you could do various adjustment type transactions to update the stock adjustments up or down. But of course Dynamics does have a stock count system, so you can do a stock count and then enter the stock values, and then Dynamics can create variance adjustment transactions for you based on the actual stock count. All right, and finally there is the actual year-end process for inventory. Of course, before you run the year-end, you can run any kind of report that you feel you may need to run within the actual inventory. So maybe you want to run your activity report to see what kind of activity were on products before, and just check that hold the figures and things like that, just to make sure that post year-end you're happy that the figures are the same, or they've matched, or they've done what they're supposed to have done. Okay, so our actual year-end process for the inventory is quite straightforward. You have options in there to remove certain items, so you can remove discounted items, sold lot attributes, and sold receipts and cost change history prior to, and you enter an actual date. Of course, you can't remove discontinued items and stuff if there are outstanding transactions for them. You can only do it if there's no transactions waiting to be posted and so forth for these actual items. And if you do tick it, Dynamics will literally remove the items from the system. And of course you have the update standard cost, and that will update your standard costs of all the items and the lines based on what you've entered on the actual inventory item itself for the standard cost. Okay. And then we have, straight after inventory, I suggest backup. Now you'll see this is the recurring theme within the webinar, because we suggest always do backups. After every year-end routine in each module, it's best to do a backup, because if something fails in the next year-end, you can easily roll back to the previous backup that you had, and you don't have to do the year-ends of the other modules all over again to catch up, if that makes sense. So try and do backups as and when you can within the year-end process. Obviously, I'm assuming that you're going to do all the year-ends on the same day or at the same time. Okay. So our receivables management module, we have some more knowledge-based articles that can be looked up online. So describing the year-end closing procedures, and also information about the closing procedure, and things about running and reprinting statements. Okay, so there's more information online for you, and you can go online and check those out, and that's done by Microsoft, so there's quite a lot of information up there. You can have a look. Okay, so if we jump down to Dynamics, so as with our inventory, we start with our sales series posting. Now, as with the inventory, you check to see which ones you want to post, and as with any other series postings or batch posting section, you would just tick the items that you want to post and post them. Okay, so it's always important to make sure you post the relevant transactions for that year that you need to, because once you've done a year end and you post transactions that are dated to the previous month or the previous year, will not be posted to that year, so regardless of the actual date of the transaction. So you just need to make sure that you always do the posting section before any kind of year end. Okay. And going back just a couple of steps, and the reason why we're doing it in this logical flow, inventory, accounts receivable, accounts payable, fixed assets, and GL, is purely because of how the actual year-end works within the GL, and fixed assets as well is after the accounts payable and receivable, is because fixed assets is related to accounts payable. So if you were purchasing an item, you could create an asset through the purchase ledger. So therefore you generally want to do the fixed assets following the accounts payable. We have a section within accounts receivable called paid sales transaction removal. Now this is quite a dangerous, if you will, option. You can remove transactions if you don't have the options to keep your historical transactions in the system. You can actually get them taken off, but it's also quite handy if you want to run statements and you don't, on the statements you don't want to see already paid transactions. This remove transactions process will actually remove the paid transactions from the statements and move them to the history, so they don't actually appear on your sales statements anymore. Okay, so the next process would be to do your aging. So this is where you'd run your aging process, and it would recalculate your aged debtors within GP, and your aging date you'd put in your year-end dates in there, and you just process that. And okay, so the next thing is the actual year-end close. So for our year-end close, basically what the sales ledger year-end close does is it moves all the brought forward balances, and it will update the activity on the actual customers, and will also update the yearly summary inquiry screen, which we'll come to next, and moves all the balances from your current year to last year, and updates your year-to-date balances for you. So when you're actually doing queries and checks, your summary screen will show the correct information. That's pretty much what the year-end close does, other than actually closing the accounts payable year as well. Okay, so you would just choose all there, and you could process. You can run it by financial or calendar year, but I would just generally choose your all. And once you do the year-end, it will update your closing dates with whatever your year-end date was based on when you actually ran it. Okay. So our next bit, so as I was saying, once you do a debtor year-end, or sorry, an accounts receivable year-end, your debtor yearly summary inquiry will update your last year figures, and then update year-to-date with whatever the current figures are, which could potentially have values if you do future posting, of course. That's quite normal. Or potentially you don't have anything in there, but it would update your last year figures and life-to-date figures as required on this screen. Okay, so payables management. Now, of course, you could do a backup between accounts receivable management and the payable management year-end. That's totally up to you. I would advise you that you do a backup, again, as I said before, between each year-end process. So if in case you need to roll back, you don't have to redo a year-end process. But generally, a lot of the year-end processes are quite quick unless you have large volume of transactions going through the system, which will mean that it could take a bit of time to run. Like the general ledger one will run quite slowly if you have large volume. Okay, so payables management. As with the other modules, there is also a knowledge base article online for this, and it details the Microsoft year-end closing procedures for the payables management. And same procedure as with the accounts receivable, or the receivables management module. We go through posting and you check the accounts payable trial balance. The only difference is there is no aging process that you need to do in the accounts payable as you would do with the accounts receivable. So accounts payable posting process, once again, you would tick the transactions that you need to post. You could check more detail by expanding the lines and seeing the number of transactions and so forth, just to see if any of the transactions were posted and so forth. But you would tick the ones that you want and then just click on post and post them as you would normally do. And we have our payables trial balance or age trial balance. So I would run the age trial balance with options. So you'd run the age trial balance with options, print it out, and then keep that. And then basically when you've done the year end for accounts payable, you'd run the summary report and make sure that everything's good and all the balances are correct and you're happy with the way it looks. Because sometimes it's always good to have a before and after report, especially for the general ledger, which we'll get to. So you can actually check the balances before and after, and also make sure that the before and after kind of matched. So there's nothing that happened within the actual year-end process that caused something to go out, a balance to go out for some reason. Okay, and similar to the accounts receivable, you have the payables management year-end. So you can choose all there, and then you just click on close year, and it will close the year and then update the closing date there with the same date that we've just closed the year with now. Okay, and similarly to the accounts receivable yearly summary, you have the creditor summary as well, which will show you the updated year-end figures. The last year and the year-to-date figures get updated, and you can run these inquiries looking at a specific financial year or your calendar year, whichever way you want to run these, and print them. Okay, so then we have our fixed assets. Now, as I said before, the reason we are running fixed assets, back up before you do anything else. Again, just a reminder, it's totally up to you, but as always, we suggest you do a backup. So as I was saying, the next module is fixed assets. So for fixed assets, the reason we're doing it at this stage, as mentioned previously, is because fixed assets can be linked to the purchase ledger. So if you're purchasing assets through the purchase ledger, to update the fixed assets register, you would run the purchase ledger or accounts payable year-end first, and then you would come in and do the fixed assets module. Now I understand that not everybody on this webinar has fixed assets. Not a great deal of people use it, but it's useful nonetheless for some to understand what the process is for the year-end of fixed assets. So we'll jump right in there. So basically, when you look at when you do a year-end for fixed assets, the bits that are actually updated are generally the asset book details. So if we were to look at an asset book and we look at the internal asset book ID in my database, you can actually see that it would update the year-to-date and the last year-to-date depreciation values. And also you would also have the year-end would also update the year of service of the actual asset itself as well, whereas in previous versions you could manually do it. In the newer versions of Dynamics, the year-end process does that. Okay, so the asset book will show the effects of a year-end on the fixed assets. So when we do a year-end with the fixed assets, it's always good to also check the asset activity. So you can run an activity report, check that you're happy with the detail on your fixed assets, print that off, and following your year end, you can come in and reprint the activity report again and make sure that you're happy with the figures and everything matches off the same and nothing has gone wrong. So there's also, you can also run the additions reports, you can also run a depreciation report as well. And also, before you do any kind of year-end in fixed assets, make sure that you've also posted any kind of additions, asset additions or retirements. So if you've done retirements or slash disposals of assets, you need to make sure that those transactions have been posted and updated. And also the depreciation journals have been updated to the GL before you actually do the year-end process in fixed assets. So the year-end for fixed asset is effectively you do it by book ID. So if you have multiple books or asset books within Asset Manager, you would do each year-end by book and process the year-end that way. So if you have multiple books, like in my example, you would have to do for each book and process it that way. Okay. So again, I've put in there, do another backup just to make sure that if something fails, as I said before, you've got backups. Too many backups, you can't have too many backups. It just makes sense to have as many backups as you possibly can. So in between each process, just keep doing that. Okay, so analytical accounting. As I said right in the beginning when we went through our list of the modules that we're going to cover, analytical accounting doesn't necessarily have a year-end process. It doesn't have one. It doesn't have a window where you click year-end and you go and it does the year-end. There is a slight procedure or some method to follow that Microsoft has actually put online for you to view. So in that knowledge base article on screen, if you use analytical accounting, it's good just to have a look and see what they suggest you, what reports and what screens to look at and what to look out for. So you understand that before you do a actual system year-end, that you can just have a look at those and make sure you're happy with it. Okay. So last but not least, we have our general ledger. So of course, depending on how many transactions or how large your database is, will determine of how long your general ledger year-end will take. So as you can see on the screen, it shows you the knowledge base articles once again. There are a few more articles with regards to the actual general ledger because it's such an important module, and if the year-end routine does fail, it's quite important of how you go about to sort that out, if not reverting to a previous backup. So these articles on your screen are really good for determining, what am I missing, or what do I need to do if I get this error message or that message, and things like that. Okay, so for our general ledger year-end, now with all same as what we got with the other modules, we start with our posting, so series posting. Now of course, if you use the actual master posting method, which is a screen within the administrator section that you can actually post transactions from all this series, like from accounts payable or accounts receivable, you could go in there and just post all the transactions from there if you wanted to, but not everyone has access to that master posting section. So that's why I've gone through the series posting of each module separately. So as with the other series posting sections, we've got our transactions in there that you can see there. You just tick off again and you click on the post and you just post them through. Okay, so of course, potentially you might have some journals in here that have are recurring journals. So the frequency could be weekly or monthly or whatever the frequency is, and it will show you the last posted date. So potentially you need to post them, or you might not need to post them. So it's worth clicking on the little down arrows there on the right there, and it will show you the detail of the transactions to see if they have a frequency other than single use. You can check when they were last posted and post them as required. Okay, so one thing that's very important during your year-end process is to make sure that your nominal accounts, your general ledger accounts, have the correct retained earnings or profit and loss year-end update account set against the profit and loss accounts. Because it's quite common for users to set up a new code and don't actually change the posting type from balance sheet to profit and loss. So when the year end comes in and that posting type is not set to profit and loss and it's supposed to be a profit and loss, the balance doesn't get transferred as it should. Okay, so it's very important, especially if you're creating a lot of new codes every year or every month or whatever. I mean, sometimes you might create one code in a year potentially for the general ledger, or not that often either. So you may not need to run this report, but it's always good practice just to run the chart of accounts report or account list report, whatever it's called, and have a look to see what the actual posting type is. You could also run a smart list, and if I go to financial accounts there, you can run a smart list and it could show you the posting type. Make sure that you want to look at the profit and loss one, and just to make sure that you're happy with some of the accounts that you know should be in your profit and loss are set as profit and loss accounts, and so forth. Okay. Obviously, if you have thousands and thousands of codes, it could take longer than a few minutes, but it's always prudent just to make sure that you're happy with the posting type and set correctly. Okay, so another thing to check is your financial period setup. Now, this is within the system setup against the financial periods, and you need to make sure that you have your next year set up. So if you don't have 2017 or 2018, whichever year you're in, set up, you would basically just type in the year, click on tab, and it would create the new periods and dates for you, and you just enter, make sure the dates are the correct dates, what they should be for each period. Okay, so you need to set that up first if it's not there already. Okay, and at this point you can start closing periods. If your process during the year is to close periods, great. You don't need to close periods here, but you can potentially just close some periods, or you can close the last period just to make sure that no one actually posts into that period before you do a year end. But generally, you don't have to have all these periods closed to do a year end. You can just do that, but you do need the next year available in this drop down, next year setup. So when you do a year end, it will roll to that next year, and it's already set up with the appropriate periods. Okay, so that's within your financial periods setup. Another thing you also have is general ledger setup, also within your administrative setup in the tools setup for your specific company in the general ledger or financials. And you have your default retained earnings account set up there to the correct one. And you also want to make sure that if this is your first time running the year end, that you've got posting to history ticked under the allow section. Now, the reason why you'd like this to be ticked is when you're doing year-end, after your year-end, you can post transactions to a historical or a closed year. Because if you don't have that ticked, Dynamics won't allow you to post any kind of adjustments to the previous year if it's closed. Okay, so you also might want to make sure that your maintain history is ticked, because this keeps a history of all your transactions. Okay, so make sure that you allow post into history is ticked. That and the retained earnings account, they are the two most important options set there. Okay. Next, we have our final thing before our year end is the detailed trial balance. So we want to run a detailed trial balance report so we can have a before and after, make sure the year end process hasn't done something to our balances. It shouldn't, but something could happen, of course. So you run a report before, have that handy, and run a report afterwards, and then double check just to make sure that you're happy. Of course, your P&L balances would have moved along to your retained earnings account in your balance sheet, but the point is just to check to make sure that you're happy with the actual balance sheet balances, and the actual retained earnings account is the balance that you were hoping it to be based on your P&L accounts. Okay, and last but not least, we have our year-end closing. Now, what's good about the later versions of GP is when you're running your year-end process, you have a progress bar at the bottom here that tells you how far along are you. So if you have a large database with lots of transactions, in previous versions of GP, you wouldn't actually know what was going on. It would look like your GP is actually hung or it's stalled, or so we don't actually know what's going on. But now in the newer versions, it's got a progress bar, so it tells you how far along it is. And once it's done, you could still go and reverse the year and reopen it again if you have to. Okay. So in this screen, you just need to make sure that you have the retained earnings account set. It pulls the default, but if you just need to make sure that's the correct one. And obviously, it will tell you what your last year end was and what the starting journal entry of your P&L journal is going to be. You can remove unused segment numbers. That's to do with the general ledger segment numbers. And you can also tick option to maintain inactive accounts. We can maintain all or maintain only the ones with budget, meaning if you don't tick that, if there's an inactive account with no budgets and hasn't been used for a long time, Dynamics can clear those off. If you tick it, Dynamics can keep those accounts, and especially the ones with budgets, or keep all, and it won't actually get rid of or close any of the accounts that you don't want to have. Okay, so once you're happy, click close, and it will run through the process. Okay, so of course, once you've done your final year, you do a backup. So you have a backup of your data that's had all the year ends done. So in case the rest of the day something happens and you want to revert back, but you don't want to do the year ends again, you can revert to your backup. Okay, guys, that's pretty much the year-end process within GP. As I said before, if you had any questions, you could type them into the chat on the right, or you could actually email the email address on the screen, sales@nolanbusinesssolutions.com, and if you have any queries, you can ping us an email and let us know. I'll have a look on the right just to see if there are any questions, and give it some time, and if there aren't any, thanks for listening, guys, or thanks for watching. And if you do have any questions, as I said, ping us an email at that email on the screen. Okay.